Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Mubarak loyalists continue the assault on anti-government demonstrators as journalists come under attack. And rallies spread to Yemen. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The
BBC correspondent in Cairo said that one person was killed and a number of people were wounded. 3 of them are in critical condition. This comes as protests continue for the 10th day, demanding President Hosni Mubarak step down. Eyewitnesses said there was heavy gunfire in Abd el-Manim Riyadh Square, close to Tahrir Square, and the army intervened yesterday to separate the pro- and anti-Mubarak protesters after violent clashes erupted in Tahrir Square. The Egyptian Ministry of Health said the number of fatalities has risen to 8, in addition to hundreds that have been wounded. This comes after protesters announced they are planning to organize a mass demonstration for tomorrow, Friday, to reiterate their demand that Mubarak go. Now we turn to Cairo and follow the latest developments with my colleague Zain El Abedin Tawfiq. Now to you, Tawfiq.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Tonight, Cairo is calmer than it was last night, even though the impact of what happened yesterday can still be felt. Yesterday's events prompted the current interim government, appointed by President Hosni Mubarak, to launch a campaign to reassure the Egyptian public. Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq has given nearly 300 minutes of media interviews in the last 3 days in an attempt to reassure the Egyptian public. As we heard earlier, he apologized for the attacks on protesters by horse and camel riders in Tahrir Square that happened yesterday. Before we follow the political developments, let's begin with the developments on the ground in Tahrir Square. Joining us is BBC correspondent Khaled Ez Al-Arab. Khaled, what does the scene look like today?
الاشتباكات مستمرة زين بين المجموعتين مجموعة المعتصمين في ميدان التحرير.
Zain, clashes are continuing between pro- and anti-Mubarak protesters in Tahrir Square. Today there were intense confrontations that included stone throwing. There were casualties. Military forces also opened fire to separate the 2 groups of protesters. By the way, these clashes took place in Abd el-Manim Riyadh Square, not Tahrir Square. Strategically speaking, this means the protesters in Tahrir Square have gained an additional battlefield to push the confrontation forward. At least 1 person was killed during the gunfire, and a number were injured, including 3 severe cases. The source of the gunfire is still unknown. Some protesters said the army opened fire on them, while others said it wasn't the army, but snipers occupying buildings in Abd el-Manim Riyadh Square that opened fire. It hasn't been verified yet, of course, but it is also possible that there wasn't a particular target, but that random gunfire hit one of the protesters. Some people also say that some of the Mubarak supporters were carrying firearms. We haven't seen this ourselves, but some protesters believe so.
Lebanese security forces barred protesters from storming the Egyptian embassy in Beirut by force, wounding 2 protesters. The Lebanese protesters held a sit-in in front of the embassy in solidarity with the protesters in Egypt. The Lebanese army has sent reinforcements to the Egyptian embassy to separate protesters from Lebanese security forces. Joining us from Beirut is Paul Salem, director of the Carnegie Institute for the Middle East. Mr. Paul Salem, what happened exactly?
A
week ago, all attention in Lebanon was focused on Lebanese affairs. But since the movement began in Egypt, all eyes have turned to the events there. No one perpetrated any act against the embassy on the first day because people still had respect for Egypt as a country, including its president. Egypt also had good relations with some parties in Lebanon. The Lebanese demonstrators empathized with the Egyptian protesters, and their demonstrations had been peaceful. But yesterday, when so-called supporters of President Mubarak stormed Tahrir Square, it provoked the Lebanese public. Then, all this anger erupted and culminated in the scene you just saw. This is not surprising. I think there is great empathy for the Egyptian protesters from all people in the Arab world and Arab communities around the world.
Mr. Paul Salem, these groups that tried to storm the Egyptian embassy in Beirut during their sit-in solidarity with the Egyptian protesters, are they affiliated with a certain political party?
I don't have the exact information, but it is known that there's a large division in Lebanon between the March 8th Alliance and the March 14th Alliance. It is also known that the March 14th Alliance has a good relationship with the regime in Egypt and received political support from them for an extensive period of time, as you know. I don't exactly know who these protesters are, but perhaps we can presume that they are from a group that does not support Egypt's policies in the region or in Lebanon. However, generally there is a sincere feeling of sorrow for what happened yesterday in Tahrir Square, and all Lebanese people are following the events in Egypt closely. People are concerned about what will happen in Egypt and where this is going. Primarily, there are concerns about the stability of the country, then for the progress towards elections, with participation from all parties in Egypt.
In your opinion, where are the events in Egypt headed?
My colleague, Dr. Ahmed Hamzawi, is in Cairo today. He is completely involved in the ongoing events there. We are all hoping that the Egyptian awakening, along with the Tunisian awakening, will secure the citizens' political rights, freedoms, and social and economic rights, so that citizens will be an effective element in the regime change in Egypt. When Egypt changes, a number of regimes in the Arab world will change as well. Egypt was the leader of the Arab world in the 1950s, and we hope that it will also be a leader in this decade. It is hoped that President Mubarak finds a quick way to step down from power, whether he stays in Egypt or not, so that we can immediately enter a transitional period where the people can lift the emergency law, amend the constitution, form a coalition government, and conduct parliamentary and presidential elections in the near future. These are legitimate demands that must be met. Everyone is hoping the Egyptian army will take a historic stance and resolve this crisis, and that the president will exit, creating a path for Egypt to truly enter the 21st century.
مشاهدينا على الصحفيين والطواقم الإعلامية وهناك استهداف
Journalists and media organizations are coming under attack in Egypt. Al-Alam's reporters were targeted in Alexandria, Cairo, and Suez, and continue to be targeted in many locations. Earlier, the news department informed us that a Turkish journalist was beaten, and another journalist was caught in between demonstrators as they covered the protests in Cairo near Tahrir Square.
ميدان التحرير. مشاهدينا هناك حملة على ما يبدو من قبل النظام المصري والمستأجرين.
It seems the Egyptian regime has orchestrated a campaign against media organizations. They are also targeting cameras broadcasting live from Tahrir Square and various other Egyptian cities witnessing demonstrations. It is a new tactic on the ground.
الصحفيين تكتيك ميداني جديد. يوم أمس لاحظنا هناك تكتيك ميداني يتعلق بإنزال مدنيين شرطة.
Yesterday, police wearing civilian clothes descended on the square to attack the demonstrators and cut off their path. They were attacked by horses and camels. Today, there are attacks on journalists.
واليوم هناك اعتداء على الصحفيين.
These attacks are taking place at specific times and in various locations.
يعني ما يجري في الإسكندرية من اعتداء على المتظاهرين يوم أمس جرى نفس السيناريو في القاهرة.
The assaults that occurred in Alexandria yesterday happened the same way in Cairo, and various Egyptian cities are experiencing what is happening in Cairo in the same way.
Ladies and gentlemen, we present Egyptian Vice President, Mr. Omar Sleiman, in an exclusive interview with the Egyptian News Channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. At this very moment, the entire Egyptian nation and the world are closely following the events unfolding in Egypt. People here in Egypt and around the world are anxiously waiting for this important dialogue. The following interview, which took place this afternoon at the Egyptian Council of Ministers, is with Mr. Omar Suleiman, Vice President of the Republic of Egypt. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Allow me to ask you about the dialogue that was held between the national and opposition blocs. Can you give us a recap of the key issues discussed during the meeting?
Before answering your question about the dialogue, I would like to speak directly to the conscientious youth of Egypt. We are passing through a delicate stage. January 25th was a day of youth mobilization. Egyptian youth have voiced their demands, and these demands are legitimate and acceptable. Their demands have been reviewed. We have met with some of their representatives who reiterated these demands. Again, these demands have been reviewed, and we will respond to them. Unfortunately, some elements with special interests may have penetrated this honorable youth movement. These elements have agendas, which may have links to foreign agendas or internal special interests. The objective is to cause a high level of instability, terror, and strife among Egyptian youth. The January 25th youth movement was not a destructive or a terrorist movement. It was a movement with legitimate demands.
British-based telecommunications company Vodafone has announced Egyptian authorities have forced the company operators to broadcast pro-government messages amid protests that have rocked the country. Vodafone Group says Egyptian authorities had been using the country's emergency laws to script and send text messages to its users, and Vodafone had no ability to change the content of the messages. The telecommunication group has condemned the situation, saying it's unacceptable. Vodafone also said the government cut mobile communications in order to prevent demonstrators from keeping in touch when the protests broke out. Well, Press TV has received an amateur footage showing that members of Israel's Sayaret Matkal, or General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, being arrested in Egypt. Let's take a look.
Joining us now from our Tel Aviv studio to look at the dramatic developments in our region is Dr. Jonathan Spire. Dr. Spire, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Some experts are expressing shock at the White House abandonment of President Mubarak, a key ally of Egypt for more than 3 decades. Do you share their surprise?
Well, I think it is surprising. I think we've all been a little bit surprised. I think looking at the administration and its motivations, the administration, I think, sees that Mubarak regime is coming to a close and doesn't want to embitter, so to speak, whatever it thinks is coming next. And it is to some degree possible to understand that logic. But having said that, I think there is a sense in which the speed with which Mubarak was abandoned, and not only the speed, but also the extent to which the White House appeared to want to make it public that the president had called for President Mubarak to stand down, and therefore, in a certain sense, even humiliate an ally, such a strong and long-standing and essential part of the U.S. arrangement in this region, I think has been surprising. So I do share the surprise. The logic can be glimpsed, can be seen, but at the same time, yes, there is that the haste and the intensity of it, I think, has been surprising.
How is the message coming out of the White House and President Obama being received in the rest of the Arab world?
Well, again, I think there is this sense of surprise. The fact of the matter is that it is a somewhat cardinal aspect of Middle East diplomacy and Middle East strategy that one has to be seen to stick by one's friends, to do well by one's friends, and to be prepared to defend them against their enemies. This, to some degree, is a kind of ABC, I would say, of Middle East diplomacy. And therefore, there is surprise that the United States administration seems to have decided not to go along with that approach and to adopt a different approach. I think that it is leading to a certain degree of happiness and enjoyment and optimism on the part of Washington's enemies, that's to say Iran's allies across the region, and frankly a certain sense of dismay, I think we can put it, on the part of those who are allied with Washington. And in that group I would also include, by the way, Israelis looking at this situation as well as others.
Dr. Spire, what would be the result in Egypt if tomorrow, after Friday prayers, President Mubarak is not in the presidential palace?
Well, I think that we have to be careful a little bit about speculating here. I think what we need to be clear on is that it is, at the moment, it looks likely that even after Friday, even after whatever happens on Friday, and we do expect an increase in the protests and a strong Muslim Brotherhood organization behind the protests, it is still likely that President Mubarak will be in power. Were he not in power, should he resign on Saturday, let's say, it's crucial to remember that even that Mubarak himself is not the regime. The regime is the free officers regime. It's the regime of Nasser, Sadat and Mubarak. Those are the heads of it. But it is a regime of an oligarchy of officers. And those officers who've been in power since 1952, a long time since before Hosni Mubarak, would remain in power even if Hosni Mubarak were to leave on Saturday. The Vice President, Omar Suleiman, no less a man of the regime, would then become the key person in the country. So even though I don't think he will resign, that's not my prediction at all, I think he'll still be there on Saturday and for a while longer. He certainly means to be there till September. Even if he does resign, the regime will still be in place.
Dr. Spire, the latest problems to break out in the region are coming from Yemen. It's called Days of Rage. President Saleh tried to reassure his constituents that he will not seek re-election in 2 years' time. Are they going to want to put up with him for another 2 years?
Well, my sense is there is certainly a mood of rage and a mood of demonstrations sweeping across the Arab world. Right now we're seeing it in Yemen. We saw it in Jordan, also, of course, in Egypt at its most intense. The aim of the rulers, and we see this in the Egyptian, in Mubarak's plan to last until September, the aim of the rulers will be to sort of last out this period of demonstrations. The idea will be that there have been protests before, the rulers will wish to make some promises, promise reform, and stay in place and still be in place when the demonstrators get tired and when the demonstrators have to go back to work and when the demonstrations begin to dissipate. That's been the practice in the Arab world before. There have been riots and demonstrations and protests in the Arab world before, and the intention of the regimes is to test the stamina of the demonstrators and hopefully to last them out. So I think if we look at President Saleh's latest statements in Yemen trying to placate the demonstrators, this should be seen as an attempt to outlast them, to get things back to calm and then to get things back to normal.
In power for 30 years, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak's family amassed a fortune estimated at over $50 billion. My colleague Salma Al-Hajj reports.
I respect President Mubarak for being a modest man like us. He is merely the son of a modest family from Kafr al-Masalha who knows the value of a bottle of olive oil and a kilo of pasta. He lived like us with the hardships at the beginning of the school year and the Eid and Ramadan. Someone said that in the 1980s. However, 30 years later, the bottle of olive oil and the kilo of pasta now cost $50 billion. The fortune of the ruling Mubarak family in Egypt is estimated at over $50 billion. The first family, composed of Suzanne Mubarak and their two sons, Jamal and Alaa, have over $40 billion in real estate and assets in banks, American investment banks, and Swiss and British commercial banks. The value of President Mubarak's fortune in 2001 was at least $10 billion, mostly liquid funds in American and Swiss banks, such as the English-Scottish Bank and the Swiss Credit Suisse. Today, the president's fortune is estimated to be at least $15 billion, the majority of which was acquired through arms deals, real estate deals in Cairo, and tourism investments in Al Gardaqa and Sharm el-Sheikh.
سيدة مصر الأولى سوزان مبارك التي تتراوح
Egypt's First Lady Suzanne Mubarak's wealth is estimated at $3 to $5 billion. According to a secret report circulating among high-level foreign leaders, she became a billionaire in the year 2000. She keeps most of her cash in American banks while she owns real estate properties in a number of European cities, including London, Frankfurt, Madrid, and Paris, as well as the United Arab Emirate of Dubai.
فرانكفورت ومدريد وباريس وفي إمارة دبي. الأمين العام المساعد للحزب الوطني الحاكم في مصر.
Deputy Secretary General of the ruling National Party in Egypt, Jamal Mubarak, alone has an estimated $17 billion in a number of banks in Switzerland, Germany, the US, and Britain. He also has two secret accounts in two different Swiss banks. His wealth is distributed in a number of investment banks in the US and Britain, including British real estate company Bristol & West and Financial Data Service, which manages mutual funds.
ومؤسسة Financial Data Service التي تدير صناديق الاستثمار المشترك.
It is well known that Jamal Mubarak is the head of the MidInvest group in London, which specializes in selling Egyptian debt, loan brokering, real estate investment, tourism programs, competing in the stock market, cash, and other businesses.
والأوراق المالية وغيرها. علاء مبارك النجل الثاني للرئيس بلغت
Alaa Mubarak, the president's second son, has $8 billion in assets and personal savings inside and outside Egypt. He owns real estate properties in Los Angeles, Washington, and New York. The properties he owns in New York are valued at more than $1 billion.
في أحد شوارع نيويورك إضافة إلى امتلاكه طائرتين شخصيتين ويخت ملكي تفوق قيمته.
He also has two private planes and a royal yacht valued at more than 60 million euros. Moreover, a majority of large companies have to offer 50% of their annual profits to a Mubarak family member. This way, the Mubarak family gets 50% of the company's net profits.
أهم المؤسسات التي يجري الحصول على تبرعات ضخمة لها من الخارج بدعوى أنها من هيئات المجتمع.
Some of the most prominent organizations collect enormous donations from overseas, claiming they're for Egyptian civil and social groups, but all the money goes to the Mubarak family. Shortly before the revolution, the ruling family fled Egypt and headed to its luxurious palace in London, a 6-story building valued at £8 million British pounds.
Reporting on the demonstrations in Yemen, our correspondent Abdelrahman Al-Shimari joins us over the phone from Sana'a. Abdelrahman, would you tell us about the situation there and describe the mood of the demonstrators?
I would like to point out that marches in Tahrir Square were held by the ruling General People's Congress Party and not the opposition. Once the ruling party became aware of the opposition's plan to hold a demonstration in Tahrir Square, they set up tents in order to take over the place. Today, a demonstration was held in favour of the president and the initiative he presented yesterday. Also, a large festival was held. An even larger festival held near the universities in Sana'a took up a large amount of space, filling the entire main street and some side streets. Of course, the demonstrations began to call on our brothers in Egypt, hoping God will grant the demonstrators in Egypt victory. They also spoke against the tyranny of Arab leaders. They chanted slogans and held posters featuring the Cuban revolutionary leaders President Abdel Nasser and former President El Hamdi.
الشيء المشترك بين التظاهرتين هو الرقصات الشعبية على أنغام الطاسة وترديد.
Both demonstrations featured folk dances and called for new policies.
طبعا من الشيء البارز.
My question was about the opposition's demonstration, which, as you mentioned, took place at Sana'a University. What are the demonstrators' demands, especially after the president announced that he will not run in the next presidential election, which will in turn change the entire system?
Of course, opposition party demands vary. They are calling for the participation of all political parties in the national dialogue to help solve Yemen's crises, such as the presence of al-Qaeda, the movements of the south, and many other demands. They have many demands, but 2 days ago a meeting was held between the president and the Yemeni Congregation for Reform, the main opposition party. News after the meeting pointed to the possibility of an agreement being reached, and it seems secret meetings are being held in order to resume the talks that were halted a while back. In addition, I would like to point out that the American president contacted the Yemeni president yesterday and praised him for his speech, in which he vowed not to install his son as president or seek re-election.
No. Abdel Rahman Al-Shimri, our correspondent from Sana'a. Thank you.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.